Understanding the different consistency levels when you mix paint and water is something that I wish I knew when I first started. I knew the basics: wet the paint, grab the paint, make sure your brush is wet or dry, etc. As I continued to grow in my skills and started teaching others, I realized I needed specific terminology to explain the consistency of paint in order to make sure that we were all on the same page. So here are my 5 levels of water to paint mixtures and how I mix to get at those levels. And I'm going to use food terms to help you visualize. Hi there, I'm Audrey, your watercolor bestie, and welcome to my studio. If you like this video and want to start your watercolor journey, join my free course, Watercolor Basics for the Absolute Beginner, and you can sign up using the link in the description below. So here we go, my 5 levels of water and paint mixtures in levels of consistency. The first level is icing. This means that there is very little water. Think of icing that you're trying to spread on your cake. It requires a little bit of work to spread it, and the paint feels really thick. This icing level is oftentimes seen in fresh paint from the tube. It's kind of difficult to get this icing level with pan paints because you have to add a little bit of water to activate the dry paints. So I don't normally paint with this level since I don't use tube paints as often. The next level is yogurt. This level is when you've added a little bit of water, maybe to your pan or tube paint, and then you pick it up with a clean, damp brush, and it's thick like icing, but because of the added water, it's a little bit smoother and easier to work with. I usually have this consistency when I pick up directly from the pan with little water. The level 3 is cream. This is my sweet spot. It's like 50-50 water and paint mixture. You can feel some body to the mixture because of the paint, but it's really smooth and glides easily on the paper. You'll still get vibrant colors as long as your brush isn't overly wet. As we get to level 4, you have more water than paint in your mixture. I call this level skim milk. You're thinning out the paint by adding more water, and you'll notice that the color is a lot lighter. It moves really easily because it's very runny, but you still have a good amount of color in it. And lastly, you've got watery. There's no better way to describe this level because you're basically painting with tinted water. It's very runny, the color is going to be very light, and in order to avoid making your mixture even runnier than it is, make sure that your brush is not too wet. Blot your brush before picking up this very watery mixture so that you don't dilute the color any further. So how do I use these 5 levels? Like I mentioned, I kind of stay between the yogurt to skim milk consistency. When I want to layer, I'll use the skim milk consistency so that I can build up the value. If I want an opaque layer or just a darker value, then I'll probably use a yogurt consistency so that it'll show up darker. Then, how can you tell which level you're at? You are mixing well, and paper will give you the clues. As you swirl your brush in the mixing area, you'll kind of feel and observe the consistency levels. With icing, you'll feel a little bit of resistance, and on the paper, it's going to be difficult to spread out. And as you go to other levels, it'll be easier to swirl and maneuver on the paper and on the palette. As a test, let's do some mixing now. I'm going to do this test twice. First, I'm going to use this ultramarine blue deep because I have it in tube paint form. And secondly, I'm going to do the test once on dry paper and once on wet paper. When doing these tests, make sure that your brush does not have excess water. And once you've mixed up your water and paint consistency, wash the brush out, blot it, and then pick up the mixture. I'm going to use this porcelain palette to mix. And I'm going to use the round size 6 brush. Let's test on dry paper first. So the first level of consistency is icing, and that's going to be right out of the tube. So go ahead and take out the cap. It's a little dirty. And I'm just going to squeeze. Now this paint obviously has some water in it, and that's why it's already wet. But I'm going to just take my dry brush and then pick up this paint and notice just how goopy it is. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. I'm going to scoop up a good amount. And since my brush is dry, you can just see how thick it is. It's very opaque. I feel a lot of resistance. And because my brush is dry, the paint is not really wanting to go anywhere. So it's almost like I'm painting with the dry brush technique with a slap of paint. So very hard to move, very thick. Okay, so that's icing. I'm gonna wash out my brush, blot it. Now I have a clean brush, and I'm gonna add just a little bit of water. I'm gonna dip my brush in the water. I'm gonna swipe it against the rim of the jar, and then come in and pick up a good amount and mix. Now you can see that it is moving pretty easily. It's still going to be a very thick color. Now I might pick up just a little bit more paint. But now that my brush is a little bit damp and there's a little bit of water in this paint, it's going to move a little bit easier than this icing level. So here we go. Right? It's a little bit effortless compared to the icing. This is yogurt. I'm gonna wash out my brush again. Blot. I'm gonna pick up a little bit more paint. Move it to another well, and this time add a lot of water. Almost to the point where it's like 50-50. There we go. And then mix that. I think this is a little bit too much water. I'm going to pick up a little bit more of this paint, mix it up. Maybe I'll pick up a little bit more of this. Definitely want it to be a little bit more runny. Okay, now I'm going to blot my brush to get rid of this excess moisture. And now pick up this paint. Okay, look at that consistency, right? This level 3 is creamy. There we go. It's still a vibrant color, but it glides on really easily. And the color is still great. Washing out my brush again, blotting, and then I'm going to pick up just some of this paint, move it over. And I'm going to add just a little bit more water to this mixture to get the skim milk level. Just a little bit more. Okay, notice how watery it feels, right? It's moving very easily. I'm going to blot my brush one more time before I pick up this paint. So blot, and then pick up this skim milk consistency. Look at that. And then paint. So you're going to have a much lighter value, but it still glides on really easily. And notice that because my brush wasn't as wet, the paint is not as watery or runny, right? It still comes on the paper evenly. Okay, washing out my brush again, blotting, and then let's pick up a little bit of this one, move it here, and then add even more water where it's now just basically tinted water. And this is our 5th level of mixture consistency. So I'm done, blot my brush, come back and pick this up, and then paint. Oh, I can barely see it, which is fine. It is just basically water. Hopefully you can see that on the screen. Okay, but again, it's not overly wet and my paint isn't like running away from me, right? I still have control over my brush strokes. All right, so those are the 5 levels of paint and water mixture consistency. We've got icing, yogurt, cream, skim milk, and watery. And this was a test on dry paper. Let's test this again on wet paper. All right, I kind of ran out of my blue paint here, so I'm gonna squeeze out just a little bit more. I'm gonna go ahead and just wet my paper. I'm just gonna do small areas so that I don't overly, so I don't feel like I have to overly paint. And if you need a refresher on the 6 stages of paper wetness, make sure to review that video first. Okay, it's got a good shine. I'm gonna blot my brush, pick up the icing level paint. Here we go. Okay, it's dispersing a little bit. It is moving a little bit, and it does feel like it's effortless because it's reacting with the water that's on the paper, right? Washing out my brush, blotting, and then getting another wet area going. Okay, I'm blotting my brush, picking up this thick paint. Okay, here we go. All right, feels great. Okay, level 3. Level 4, the skim milk. And last but not least, watery. So try this exercise for yourself. You'll notice that some paints will have more or less levels of consistency depending on how it was made. Experiment and have fun, and keep all your papers in a journal or a binder so you can reference them later. I'd love to hear from you. Was attaching names to the levels of consistency helpful? And if so, how was it helpful? Please leave a comment down below and subscribe to this channel and like this video if it was helpful to you in any way. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Happy painting!